Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show, coming to you from the Citizens Bank studio from the Mississippi Delta, and I always enjoy that little guitar riff. It reminds me of the famous Father of Blues, Robert Johnson, and the way he played that guitar. People discovered him so long after he died. People like Eric Clapton and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and I'm right here near actually where one of the cemeteries he's claimed to have been buried. So I think 3 or 4 communities claim that he's buried there. But the blues marker is here, right outside of Greenwood. I'm sitting at Itabena now. Let me bring my next guest in, and then I have something I want to share just about what we were talking about during the break. But this is Dave Dennis from Specialty Contractors. He's a longtime community leader. He's been involved in the Federal Reserve for a number of years, and we'll chat about that a little bit. He's got a good finger on the pulse of the regional economy and certainly here in coastal Mississippi. But without any further ado, let me welcome my friend Dave back to the show. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well, Ricky. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this morning.
Well, what's interesting is, so Dave's a big supporter of Auburn. He played at Auburn, and he has a long history of involvement in the athletic program at Auburn. And of course, Jeff Duncan, he's covered the SEC in great detail, especially LSU. He's the leading reporter for the New Orleans Saints. And of course, Kyle plays the music in the Superdome during the Saints game. So it's always interesting to me to have these conversations during the break. I wish, frankly, I wish we'd have recorded that whole thing and we'd have had a whole show that we could have done. Kyle's actually saying no because the thing Kyle's sharing that we would never share on the air. But the thing is, it's really interesting, the conversation we were having, and it's good to hear you sort of go back and forth with Jeff, someone who has such a good finger on the pulse of what's going on. And I enjoyed just listening to you guys talk.
Well, it's interesting when you see someone that has access to a locker room, and I am a sports guy. It's part of life. It teaches a lot of leadership skills, teamwork skills that are applicable in business and family, wherever you want to go. If you're in a church organization, you have to have leaders, and in most sports programs build leaders. And you can look around. We'll just say the NFL because Jeff was talking about the Saints earlier. And I'm not going to weigh in yay or nay on whether they're in good hands or not because I'm not close enough to know. But when you have a good, solid leader, someone that is a person that the players want to follow, the coaches want to follow, and candidly, your customers happen to be the fans that buy tickets. Your customers happen to be the people that buy concessions at the stadium or watch the ball game on television for ratings. So if you have a good leader that brings people in, then it's going to enhance the whole organization. It's just going to make it stronger. And that, Ricky, candidly, is I think what Jeff was trying to talk about was different groups have it, different groups don't have it. And we'll let the pundits, of which I am not, by the way, weigh in on whether the Saints do or don't currently. But I think they're on an 0-for-3 streak right now, so one might tend to think the trend needs to be reversed.
Hey, listen, my son Justin Matthews broke from the family code, and that is we all went to the University of Southern Mississippi, and all our kids went to the University of Southern Mississippi, and then Jordan went from there off to Ole Miss Law School. But Justin, from a very young age, because of you, decided he wanted to go to Auburn. So my family we're Auburn fans. We're War Eagle fans. We went for the 4 years he was at actually 5 years that he was at Auburn. We loved going there. We loved paying attention. We loved visiting with you, Dave. But, in the day of the transfer portal and NIL and all of this, it creates a whole different set of challenges. And my read on it, and especially looking at the commits that continue to commit to Auburn is in good hands in this new era, aren't they?
I agree. I don't know Hugh Freeze as well as I certainly have known some of his predecessors. Many Mississippians do. I spoke to him before the Ole Miss game a few weeks ago. In fact, our Lieutenant Governor, Delbert Hoseman, and his wife, Lynn, have a granddaughter that's at Auburn currently, and they came over and stayed with us for the weekend for the Ole Miss game. But it's a phenomenal school. Take the athletics part out of it. It's hard to compare yourself on particularly the football field with a Coach Saban who clearly is head and shoulders above probably anybody of our generation, most likely from a leadership role. But notwithstanding that, Auburn is a good school. Steve Forbes was there at a business dinner one night, and I happened to be seated immediately next to him. We're elbow to elbow, and he said, "You know what? The most conservative school, not in political conservative, but conservative in terms of quality of life, in terms of where you would want your children to go and feel safe. And doesn't matter what demographics you're from, doesn't matter what gender you are, that is a safe, fun school to be at." And I've enjoyed it. Was down on the field for the Iron Bowl. It's just a neat place to be.
Saban, man, this may be his greatest coaching year. I mean, what he had to do.
I'm going to agree. And let me put one or two things in perspective. I had opportunities. I'm not an eye person, which you know, Ricky.
Yeah.
In fact, the total opposite. Yeah. I had the opportunity. I had an offer from Coach Bryant at Alabama, Georgia Tech, and Southern Miss, a few places. I walked on at Auburn because my late wife and I wanted to go there. And so that's what we did. I called Coach Jordan and wound up playing a little bit when little bitty guys could play. But it's a good school to go to, and it's particularly a good school if you want to feel as a parent that your children are in fairly safe hands. And, they can get in mischief just like any of us did growing up. But it's by and large a very safe place to be. And they're drawing a lot of NIL attention. I will say that. They've gotten, I think, on the wide receiver package alone, there are either 2 or 3 5-star commits, and then 1 4, or maybe it's 2 and 2. I don't recall, but there's 4 that are 4 or better, just on wide receiver. And it is, make no mistake, it is a major league business at this point in time.
It is. It's hard. That part is hard to watch. I tell you, Auburn, just a personal note, Auburn, I'm a big believer in Mississippi schools, don't get me wrong, but my son, Justin, had to break from the family, as I mentioned, but he got such a great education. And I watch him now at Price Waterhouse on the international consulting team, just got back from doing work in India. And man, he's just hitting it out of the park. And Auburn prepared him, man. He went into his gig ready to go. And
he got engaged in leadership groups, Ricky. Both of my kids, I grew up in Alabama, is candidly, because Auburn was a public institution, and that's pretty much what we could afford to do. My kids got law degrees from Ole Miss. They did get Mississippi educations ultimately in advanced degrees, but this is a good state. And by the way, they came back home ultimately to work in Mississippi, which you and I have talked about brain drain reversal on many occasions, and they went away, got educated, came back. So that is what we hope. But your children are phenomenal, Ricky, and make no mistake about it. They're all good. All 3 of them are exceptional leaders.
Hey, Dave, what's interesting about watching you with your kids? You and Jane did such a wonderful job with your kids. They're smart as hell. They're extraordinarily well educated. And you would hope that they would come back and get involved in the business. I mean, that's always your hope.
Well, sure.
They go out and you let them go, and
I don't work my whole life.
Well, you got to let them do their wings. You know how the story goes. But to see them come back and hit it out of the park the way they have, that's got to be incredible.
I thought we were good running a business, and we were pretty good at it. I will admit. The kids, I just sit there in awe and go, holy mackerel. We were in AA ball, not major leagues, compared to the way they're operating. And a lot of it is technology driven, that candidly I can do it, but it's second nature to them. They'll whip through it, and it's done while I'm sitting there figuring it out.
Yeah.
But it has a lot to do with exposure, it has a lot to do with expectations, and that's what we try to do in life. That's what we try to do in the business. That's what we try to do in the community. And honestly, that's what you did. And I'm going to equate this back to your son Harold time, Ricky, and you're certainly doing it on your show now. You are encouraging people and challenging them to a degree to have the expectations to make this a better place. And if I have any epitaph later in life, I would hope it's that they made it a little bit better than they found it. And that's truthfully, that's what you try to do.
Ann said to me, I've shared this before, but it's important to note that you're really only as good as your last performance, And Ann said to me, she said, people won't even remember you as the Sun Herald publisher. They'll just remember you through your show. But I thought the way that George Schlegel, God rest his incredible soul.
Unbelievable.
But I like the way that George said it. I asked him not long before he died, how does he want to be remembered? And he said, I don't want to be remembered. He said, I just want the things that I was involved in to continue. And if I had a small role in creating the kind of coastal Mississippi that caused people to want to come back here, whether my name's associated with it or not, then I will have achieved my goal. And he, he meant that.
He did mean it. I would take most years. We would take a guy's ski trip, and it was a phenomenal trip. It was a session where we would ski hard during the day, come in, and then we would sit down at the dinner table for hours.
Let's do this. I don't want
to
to short circuit. We're going to come back on the other side, and we'll get Dave's interpretation of George's incredible leadership and how that played out. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I have my friend Dave Dennis from Specialty Contractors. And, it's interesting. We never know where the conversation is going to go, but we started talking about legacy. And you can't help but think about George Schlegel when you think about legacy and the impact he had on so many of us. And, even in his death and the words he expressed prior to his death, he inspires us with, it's not about us. It's about, the things we put in place and the things that we're part of. And that's what legacy is. It's not whether they remember you or not. It's whether they are able to enjoy the things that you were part of. And that was the point that George was making. But what a substantial figure.
Oh, Ricky, he had more impact than almost anything. I remember him sitting in my office. We were moving banking. I'm in Alabama, grew up in Alabama, which many of you know, and moved over here in 1976. Well, in 1984, we were getting ready to move all our banking over to Mississippi. And George and Sal Domino sat in my office. I remember George, I'm in commercial construction. He took his hands and he did, if all the bad debts of Hancock Bank were this tall, this much of it was construction and development. And I said, oh, great. So I don't even need to talk to you. He said, no. We will work with you on character and on a lot of other issues. And I'm going to tell you, they were phenomenal. And he personally attended to a lot of that. But if I had a major decision on making an investment, I wouldn't talk to him sometimes. I'm talking major things on a couple of career opportunities that you've been aware of in the political arena.
Yeah.
I went and talked to him and said, this is what is on the table for us. And he had wanted to run for mayor as a young guy, and he chose not to, and he stayed with a bank, which was a good call. But it grew a career. It let him grow a family. It let him be a dad. Well, I chose the same path and stayed in a private arena to coach baseball, to coach football, to camp out with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and honestly be dad and live the life of what hopefully is raising a family and growing a community, not just your family, but the community around it also. Yeah. That was George's charge in life. I remember him looking at me and he said, when I had the chance to be mayor many, many, many years ago when I'm in my 20s, a gentleman, Jack Watson, that the power company Plant Watson's named for, and you've heard his story 100 times. He said, George, if you stay at the bank, where will you be in 20 years? If you become mayor, sooner or later, you're going to have probably worked your way through a career, and then where are you going to be? You're going to be starting from scratch at age 45, as opposed to where you are. And I took that to heart, and that was kind of a game plan we went. But I had the luxury of once a year for a week going and spending time snow skiing with him, and we would sit up and literally talk till midnight if he could stay awake, or if either one of us could stay awake. That might be the big deal. But it was phenomenal conversation. It was always philosophical. It was, what can we do to make it better? What can we do to help not just Gulfport where he lived? I live in Pass Christian, but what can we do to make the whole ambient feel for the coast and Mississippi better? That was his charge in life, and I know of no one in my lifetime on this coast that did it better.
Well, look, it's well documented how I feel about him, and I think about his preparation of people like John Hairston, who will run with that torch and do amazing things as a result of that. I think about people like Lenny Sawyer. I love the way that Lenny talked about on the tribute thing when they lived in Western Gulfport, that George always picked him because he was 4'0". And no, he said 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide, I just thought, isn't that that's such a sweet thing, man. I mean, that speaks to brotherhood and love and what's in the heart of those people.
Lenny is still working his way through it. They were like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer friends from the get-go, from the time they were on Woodward Avenue in West Gulfport. And I'm going back into the early 40s. They grew up together. Neither one of them had a lot to other than an old rusty wagon and a beat-up bicycle, and that's where life started for both of them, and they worked their way to the top.
What a great success story for both of them, that's for sure.
I agree.
Hey, listen, real quick, you've been on the Fed, so when you rub shoulders with Fed people, are they happy with the way things are beginning to look now? What you hearing from folks?
Well, I was one of the board of governors, Chairman Greenspan, and then later Chairman Ben Bernanke's 3 appointments. That wasn't a presidential; it was a board of governors and chairman deal. So I had a chance to visit with them significantly. Cindy and I had a chance last week to have dinner with Raphael Bostic, who is the president of the Atlanta Fed, but a phenomenal person. What are they thinking? Their thoughts are Congress has got to curtail spending. If they don't, the Fed has no choice, Ricky. They have no choice other than the only stimulus that they can put into a market right now is dealing with interest rates and money supplies and other things. And you run the risk of inflation, which we saw when we dumped a lot of money in the market politically and monetarily from almost a necessity point of view. You saw it after 9/11, and that was a necessity. And you saw it after the pandemic got rolling in early 2020. Yeah. They, meaning the Fed, feel Congress has to curtail full spending. That's not a political comment. But once that takes place, actually, this economy is pretty strong right now.
Yeah.
Employment is at a phenomenal level, and now that's cooling off some, obviously, but it's been a buyer's market if you're in the labor market, so to speak. If you have a good trade and a good profession, you can probably find a good job somewhere.
Hey, so Dave, what's interesting
going into the future?
Yeah, the
horizon is a little bit less optimistic and less rosy.
So we're coming to the end of the segment together, but it's interesting. It makes you wonder about the financial advisors to Biden, because it's clear the Fed is concerned about our spending. And even still, he's trying to forgive $5 billion worth of student loans in the moment of this. And listen, I get it. The loans are high. The interest rates are high. It's difficult. But at the end of the day, can America afford to be letting people off the hook like that? $5 billion. I mean, just it's incredible. Dave, we're out of time, but it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
Okay.
Yeah, have a great day. And by the way, thanks for all your leadership of the Train Museum, man. What a wonderful attraction that is. If you haven't been
talk about hitting it out of the park. Cindy Walker's knocked it.
Cindy's done
totally out of the park.
She's so smart and so good at what she does. Hey, listen, it's been great.
I hang around with her.
Yeah, I bet it is a reason to do. Hey, listen, have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday morning.